starting late, and I am late or behind on the course material. I didn't make as much progress as I wanted last class. I meant to finish the Inferno, but I guess I took too much delight in souls in torment. And so I'll repent of that and pray forgiveness for enjoying it a little bit too much. But I want to go right to the end of the Inferno because I do want to get to Purgatorio and Paradiso, even though I wouldn't have expected you to read all of that. I just wanted to give you a sense of the book. It's too grand to deal with adequately in a first-year course, and it's too complicated as well for that matter. But I still wanted to get into it a little bit because it continues on with the epic, and now it's Christianized it, and I wanted to observe some of the ways in which it would do that without going into the detail that he does. Remember, Homer writes 24 books and Virgil 12. Dante writes 100 cantos. And the 100 cantos are obviously not the same length, but there's a lot of richness and complexity to them. So it isn't easy reading. This is not something that you pick up and read lightly, but still worth doing. I'm going to go right down to the bottom of hell, the ninth circle, here described, marked by errato, or error, or as I said, when you think of it in terms of how love has been misapplied, the early forms were incontinence, so love that was just not restrained in its appropriate fashion. The lower middle portion of the Inferno was love exercising itself in violence. And now we get to the bottom of hell where it is characterized by fraud. And fraud is associated with false speech and betrayal. And there are 4 circles even, or divisions within the 9th circle that involve the worst form of fraud, and that's treachery. Betrayal. Somebody asked me whether that might not hold true of Paolo and Francesca because it's a marital relationship in which one partner is betrayed, and I said, yep, I could see why that you might see it that way. But in general, that is reserved for, not for the way Dante sees it at any rate. Although the first division of the 9th circle of traitors is called Cain, named after Cain. These are traitors to the family. But now the treachery is marked by bloodshed. Again, it could be, you could throw them in with the violent then, right? And this is where we'll meet Paolo's brother, because he killed his brother. So he's thrown in there. So these are the traitors to the family. I'll just list them here. The first is called Cain, traitors to the family. The second is called Antenora, a traitor to your country. It's not on the map here. The third is called Ptolemy, betrayers of one's host. So it violates hospitality. Remember the significance of hospitality even in Homer. But each of these levels, by the way, is more serious than the other. The fourth is called Judeca, named after Judas Iscariot. And this is a traitor to one's lord or master. The worst form of sin in Dante's rational ordering of hell. Again, he's following Aristotle in this, not following scripture. He's giving a rational explanation for why things are where they are, is the Judeca, and there they find the worst traitors of all, named after none other than Judas Iscariot. And we will find a portrait of Satan down there as in Canto 34. So let me get to Canto 34 if I can. Family, country, host, and master. And he goes down, and he's down, and as he goes further down, as I say, things get colder and colder. The landscape isn't marked by the wind blowing around, but by no air whatsoever moving, and the figures are encased in ice. reflects a certain idea of physics in Dante's day, which they observed on the properties of water. When it's hot, it evaporates. When it's cold, it freezes. You can see that the water is harder and denser, and as he gets closer to the dense core of the earth, things get smaller and smaller, and so therefore they get colder. There's associations there. Thereafter, and this is not for Dante, but the effect of Dante is that Arctic landscapes are associated with hell thereafter in literature. So in Frankenstein, when the explorer goes to the North Pole, it's a hellish landscape. The imagination of the Western world is influenced by Dante's portrait here. Again, he's not following scripture, which describes it as fires, but it is associated with hell. So the same thing in Rings of Power recently. If you are watching that wretched show, she goes up to the frozen north where Sauron last was, and it's a hellish landscape. It's inhospitable to any creature. Hellish place. And it also, those who voyage there, like Victor Frankenstein, are seen to be reckless and uncaring towards others to go there as well. It's a very dangerous exploit. It's an unwise one at that. So it's an odd thing to put Galadriel associated with wisdom with that, but then I didn't construct the show. Anyway, in Canto 34, we meet a figure at the bottom of this pit of now ice, and this figure is described as a giant, and I'm going to read a little extract from that. Pull it over here. The emperor of the despondent kingdom so towered from the ice up from mid-chest, so he's buried in the ice up to his chest, but above you still can see him. And I match better with a giant's breadth than giants match the measure of his arms. So compared to a giant, he was that much bigger. He was a giant amongst giants. That's how large this being was. Now you can gauge the size of all of him if it is in proportion to such parts. If he was once as handsome as he now is ugly, and despite that raised his brows against his maker, one can understand how every sorrow has its source in him. This is none other than Satan. I marveled when I saw that on his head he had 3 faces. Again, this is allegorical in many ways, but he had 3 faces. One in front, blood red, then another 2 that just above the midpoint of each shoulder joined the first. And at the crown, all 3 were attached. So it's a 3-faced monster. The right looked somewhat yellow, somewhat white. The left in its appearance was like those who come from where the Nile descending flows. So brown. Beneath each face of his, 2 wings spread out as broad as suited so immense a bird. I've never seen a ship with sails so wide. They had no feathers, but were fashioned like a bat's, and he was agitating so that the 3 winds made their way out from him, and all Cocytus, remember this is a river in the underworld, is froze before those winds. He wept out of 6 eyes, and down 3 chins, tears gushed together with a bloody froth. Within each mouth, he used it like a grinder with gnashing teeth. He tore to bits a sinner, so that he brought much pain to 3 at once. The forward sinner found that biting nothing when matched against the clawing, for at times his back was stripped completely of its hide. That soul up there who has to suffer most, my master said, Judas Iscariot. His head inside, his legs, he jerks without. Of these other 2, with their heads beneath, the one who hangs from that black snout is Brutus. See how he writhes and does not say a word. The other, who seems so robust, is Cassius. But night has come again and it is time. So one is Judas Iscariot, obviously betrayal of his Lord, the Lord Jesus. The other 2 are traitors connected with Julius Caesar. if you read Julius Caesar by Shakespeare, Brutus is one of the last of the conspirators to stick his knife in him, and in Shakespeare's words, "A tu, Brute, and you as well, Brutus, my friend, have knifed me." In various traditions, Brutus is seen very differently. In the English-speaking world, Brutus is seen as a defender of freedom, defender of liberty, defender of the republic. Caesar was going to become an emperor and a tyrant, and he was trying to preserve ancient liberties, so he slew his friend. But for Dante, who sees in the ancient Roman Empire a forerunner of the Holy Roman Emperor and Holy Roman Empire, it is an act of betrayal at the political level. So he sticks Brutus in one mouth and Cassius in another. So these are political, and they're even pre-Christian traitors, but he sees them as either traitors against the Lord himself or against a political master, and a particular one, a very important one at that. But Satan is tearing them apart and flaying their backs, and this happens eternally. Like the flesh regenerates, and it does it again each time. Just as the Lord's back was flayed with a whip of cords, took bits out of the back, same thing is happening here again and again and again eternally. Very awful image. But at this point, we have a problem, and it's a problem in terms of visualizing what's happening. And he tries to describe it. I'll put a map up which will give a better sense of it. As he goes into the Inferno, he's going further and further down, right? Going down towards the center of the earth. He's now at the center. At the center of that pit is Satan encased in ice. But he's only encased up to the chest. Below the chest, we don't see. But Dante is going to climb downwards and eventually find that when he comes out the other side, it's suddenly going upwards. Because from this point onwards, you go down to the depths of hell, but when you get out of hell, you go up purgatory. So the visual image is, remember, so we're going to go from here, the Inferno, over here, to the Purgatorio here. And Purgatorio, so let me see if I can put it here. So this is hell. The earth that is displaced from Satan hitting the earth pushes up Mount Purgatory on the other side. And it goes from going downward to suddenly going upward. You're now in the southern hemisphere. Begin in the north, you go down far enough, and then eventually when you get to the center of the earth, he suddenly starts climbing upwards, and he's disoriented. How on earth did I suddenly face up? Well, you've come out the other side, and you're no longer in hell. You're now going upwards towards that mountain that you saw at the beginning of the Inferno. When he couldn't climb up the mountain, there were 3 beasts that were in his way. He could see the glimmering light, but the beasts, which represented incontinence and violence and fraud, barred his way. Now you can get up it, because Virgil has led you there. So he climbs down to the bottom of this, and he climbs through his haunch. In other words, he goes up his backside, basically, through the crack in his, right, up the other side. So at the bottom of hell is Satan's. I don't need to. You get it, right? That's the bottom of hell. And then he comes out the other side, and suddenly it's what we see here. It's Mount Purgatory. And let me give a little larger image there. And when we get there, we see a mountain, and the mountain has terraces, and there are 7 terraces. And the 7 terraces represent 7 virtues that one needs in order to overcome 7 sins, 7 deadly sins. And now we're getting into Christian thinking. Hell was organized in accordance with pagan thinking, with Aristotle's rational idea of what constitutes an evil act. These represent the virtues ancient, that is the classical age's understanding, the cardinal virtues, a third way of putting the same thing, and the theological virtues. Well, what are they? Now, I'll show you right here. Pride, the first terrace of sin. Envy, wrath, sloth, avarice, gluttony, and lust. These are the 7 deadly sins listed in the 7 terraces. Dante, as he goes up Mount Purgatory, finds that at the bottom he has 7 P's on his forehead. And the P represents sin, peccatum. If it were in English, he'd have an S. Because it's in Latin, it's a P. Church's liturgical language is Latin, so peccatum. As he rises up Mount Purgatory, the P, as he goes up each terrace, the P disappears from his forehead. The sin is being removed from him by process of ascent. As he goes up and up and up, he will come closer and closer. No, I don't want that anymore. Go away. Towards heaven. At the top of this, I don't know what this is doing. At the top of this is a celestial paradise. This is where Adam and Eve began. At the top of Mount Purgatory. Because they had all the virtues. This is where heaven and earth meet. To some degree. They're righteous. They have all their virtue intact. God meets them, heaven and earth come together, God walks in the garden with them, etc. This is where they meet. Now, don't visualize it too much, but this is a visualization of what Dante has in his mind's eye. There's no place like this. He understands that. It's for the purposes of imagining how this works. So he'll go up Mount Purgatory, and in the earthly paradise, as he gets to that point, then he will get the handoff will happen, and Beatrice will take him the rest of the way up through heaven, and he will continue to go up and up and up and up. As he goes up, he will go up through the celestial solar system, the planets, and the planets themselves are in spheres. I'll talk about that when I get to John Donne. I'll deal with cosmology then. I don't want to deal with it today just because of lack of time. I'll spend more time on it when we get there for now. But we move into purgatory. Let me look at purgatory here. And these 7 deadly sins, which are counterbalanced with, as I say, the 7 virtues. These are not the virtues, by the way, in some ways, although I guess they are in terms of Christian terms. But in terms of the way that Dante describes them, let's talk about them in terms of cardinal virtues and theological virtues. What are the cardinal virtues? Prudence, courage, justice, temperance. We'll meet them in the form of the figure here. Let me get this right away. Oops. Move on to Purgatorio. There we go. Need it in English. And when we get here, we're going to find that a second invocation of the muse happens. He had to invoke the muse when he was about to describe hell. Now he needs the muse's help to describe purgatory. To course across more kindly waters now, my talent's little vessel lifted her sails. Leaving behind herself a sea so cruel. And what I sing will be that second kingdom in which the human soul is cleansed of sin, becoming worthy of ascent to heaven. But here, since I am yours, O holy muses, may this poem rise again from hell's dead realm, and my Calliope rise somewhat here. Now, Calliope, the word named, is the muse of epic poetry. Very specific. If you didn't think it was an epic before, now it's abundantly clear. But he only invokes Calliope by name here because what he was describing earlier was a pagan thing. This is a Christian-inspired Calliope. He's going to talk about how sin not only is presented and virtue, but also how they are purged and properly represented. So it's not enough just to resist sin, the sin of pride. One has to exhibit the virtue of humility. It's not enough to be devoid of envy, you have to show mercy. You can't just avoid wrath, you have to be peaceable, and so forth. So there's a way of showing the absence of this, but how do you present it positively? Yes, you want to avoid all those things. All those things there were being punished in the underworld. And note that they're sort of reversed. Lust was at the outset of the first canto, Canto 5, when sin was being punished, the sin of lust. That's the least bad of the sins here, etc. And there are different types of loves. In the lower purgatory, it's perverted love. In the fourth canto, it's deficient love, sloth. You're, just a little bit lazy. You can't motivate yourself enough to do good to others. It's not that you wish them harm, and you do wish them well, but guess what? You can't get off your backside to do anything about it. That's a form of sin. And opposite to that, you will go out of your way to do good. Solicitude is being presented there. So that's a deficient form of love. And then there's also excessive forms of love. So you love avarice, well, you love food too much. You love material goods too much. Sorry? Desire for material goods, usually. It could be food, but it's usually money, greed. Gluttony is specifically related to food, usually. But these are excessive loves of things. These also need to be purged and presented. Now, the first figure that so he invokes Calliope, the epic muse, and he compares his voyage to Ulysses, that is Odysseus, whom we've met already. The Roman name for him is Ulysses, and also Aeneas. And he looks to the central theme of his voyage, which is rising from the dead. Because remember, this is now Saturday. He's anticipating that. He's not there yet. That will be when he goes to heaven on Easter Sunday. Now we're on the day between, right? And he goes and rises from the underworld, and he notes that the sun has risen as well. Remember, it was dark when he was setting in, and now the sun has risen. And the sun betokens revelation and reason. The light of reason, the light of revelation. The two are going to work hand in glove. And he also sees 4 stars. And the 4 stars are the stars of the Southern Cross. This is a constellation that you cannot see on this side of the equator, but you can see from the south. It's called the Southern Cross. There are 4 stars, as you can imagine, 1 up, 1 down, and the 2 on the other sides. This is why South Americans, footballers, all do this, thing when they score a goal, they do the Southern Cross because they're from the south. I don't know. Anyway, that was flippant. Never mind. But these 4 stars that he sees represent the 4 temporal virtues. That is, the virtues that hold true in this life, that everybody recognizes, whether they're pagan or Christian. And as I say, they are prudence, courage, justice, and temperance. These are active virtues. These are things that everyone admires, everybody esteems. Odysseus himself had a sort of prudence, a wisdom. Every hero has courage. Justice is what the hero does, and temperance is self-control. Aeneas represented temperance in the sense that he had to set aside his own desires and to do his duty. There's a temperance that went on with that. But along with these are 3 theological virtues that the ancient world does not know about, and those are faith, hope, and charity. Faith, hope, and charity. represented by certain colors as well, green, white, and red. The three colors of the Italian flag, by the way. Mentioned in clause in 1 Corinthians 13. Faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. Right? These are the three theological virtues. Faith is of no importance to the pagans. They believe in gods, but they don't have faith. Faith is not the same thing as believing in a god or gods. That's not what faith is. Faith is a dependence and a realization of God's grace. It doesn't belong to religion per se, because religions don't understand grace. It's just devotion in a particular way. Hope involves a hope for the future. It's a god of history. The gods of the pagans are going to send them to the underworld at the end of it. There's no hope there. The saints of old look toward, have a hope for the future, because they have a view that the future is going to be different and better than the present age. And love is what moves everything, especially Dante's whole Divine Comedy, which concludes every canto with the word stelle, stars, and they're moved by love. But the first figure that he meets, I mentioned this last time, in the Inferno, there was a figure with the tail that wrapped around the figures. What was his name again? Do you remember? Midas. Midas? Midas, good. And he is presented as a sort of a beast. But he's the judge of the underworld. But as I say, he's not the judge. God is the judge. He's a bureaucrat that follows the orders and sends them in the right way. Now we meet a second sort of judge, or a guardian, if you will, and his name is Cato. Let me come to Cato. After my eyes took leave of those four stars, turned a little to the other pole, from which the wane had disappeared by now, the constellation, I saw a solitary patriarch. Near me, his aspect worthy of reverence, that even son to father owes no more. His beard was long and mixed with white, as were the hairs upon his head, and his hair spread down to his chest in a divided tress. The rays of the four holy stars so framed his face with light that in my sight he seemed like one who is confronted by the sun. And who are you that can escape this? He asked Dante, who are you? How did you get out of hell? And who is your guide? How could you escape the eternal prison? Who is your guide? Who served you both as lantern when up from the deep night that will always keep the hellish valley dark? You were set free. The laws of the abyss, have they been broken? Or has a changed decree in heaven let you, though damned, approach my rocky slopes? My guide, Virgil, took hold of me decisively by way of words and hands and other signs. He made my knees and brow show reverence. Then he replied, I do not come through my own self. There was a lady sent from heaven. Her pleas led me to help and guide this man, Dante. But since your will would have a far more full and accurate account of our condition, my will cannot withhold that what you request. This man has yet to see his final evening. He's not yet dead. But through his folly, little time was left before he did. He was so close to it. As I have told you, I was sent to him for his deliverance. The only road I could have taken was the road I took. I showed him all the people of perdition. Now I intend to show to him those spirits who in your care are bent on expiation, purging sin. I want to show them now. I've shown them, those that are the spirits of perdition, now those who are on expiation. To tell you how I led him would take long. It is a power descending from above that helps me guide him here to see and hear you. Now it may please you to approve his coming. He goes in search of liberty, so precious as he who gives his life for it must know. You know it. You who in Utica found death for freedom was not bitter when you left the garb that will be bright on the great day. Eternal edicts are not broken for us. There's no change in the nature of the world. The eternal decree of life and death is as before. And this man's alive, and I'm not bound by Minos. Why? Because he's in limbo. But I am from the circle where the chaste eyes of your Marcia are, so his wife. And she still prays to you, O holy breast, to keep her as your own, for her love then incline to us, allow us through your 7 realms. I shall thank her for kindness you bestow, if you would let your name be named below. While I was there, within the other world, Marcia so pleased my eyes, he then replied, each kindness she required I satisfied. So he lets her up. But now that she dwells beyond the evil river, she has no power to move me any longer. Such was the law decreed when I was freed. But, if a lady from heaven speeds and helps you, as you say, there is no need of flattery. It is enough indeed to ask me for her sake. Go then. But first, wind a smooth rush around his waist and bathe his face to wash away all of hell's stains. So onwards and up you go. This is Cato. He was an ally, this is interesting, he was a pagan ally of Pompey against Julius Caesar. As was Brutus and Cassius. Where did we just leave Brutus and Cassius? Being chomped in hell by Satan. But Cato is here. He's known for his stoic virtues. He committed suicide. He didn't kill Caesar, but he could not bear the idea of tyranny. So rather than take Caesar's life, he took his own life. He thought it was wrong to raise his hand against his friend Caesar, against the man who was about to be emperor. I won't do this. He took his own life. Becomes famous as a figure of justice. And here he represents a sort of worldly wisdom and justice. Known for his stoic virtues. And he is a sort of a herald of the Christian era. So the light on his face resembles the sun. By the way, Cato is a well-known lawgiver. When I said he's a judge, he's known as a just man. He's got a forked beard, a bit the way Moses is portrayed in paintings and in statues. So if you see some of the forked beard, it might be Moses or it could be Cato. Depends. And Dante is attempting here in Purgatorio to fuse the classical and the Christian virtues, and describes as a sort of exodus. But he goes onwards and upwards, and I am always conscious of time here because I'm catching up here. I'm going to skip over some of the cantos here and talk about the 7 P's. They're in Canto 9, though. Let me talk. I mentioned this already. I'll take you to it. In Canto 9, we find Dante having ascended the canto of sloth, and now it is, he is, as I say, moving upward, but he still has some of the vestiges of original sin in him. And he's carried, and he falls asleep, and falling asleep is part of the process of purgation. When he gets into paradise, he won't sleep anymore. You won't need sleep. Sleep is to recover a loss of vitality and strength that comes with the consequence of having a sinful human body and being subject to our human nature. He will get rid of that. But for now, he falls asleep and dreams. And the dream occurs while the sun has already come up, so it's a good dream. And he's carried through the dream. In dream, I seemed to see an eagle poised with golden pinions in the sky. Its wings were open. It was ready to swoop down. I seemed to be there where Ganymede, the cupbearer for Zeus, deserted his own family while he was snatched up for the high consistory. Within myself, I thought this eagle may be used to hunting, only here its claws refused to carry upward any prey found elsewhere. But down he goes, and then he wakes like Achilles. And the eagle, I think here symbolizes Saint Lucia. Dante's patron saint also represents the light and divine grace. I think Saint Lucia, and I might be wrong here, I think she is often one of the patron saints in Sweden in the north. I think her day is on the darkest day of the year. Might be wrong, like December 21st. Patron saint of light at a time when the darkest day of the year. But the eagle represents the Roman Empire. If you think about Roman empires, they hold the herald, and it's an eagle, right? And it's a threat in that sense. But in Christian iconography, it represents St. John the Evangelist, presented as an eagle. So it changes its associations. It was once associated with oppression and tyranny and arm and military might. It then becomes the sword of the gospel, sword of the word of God. These are later associations. And he will ascend him to the seventh heaven, and he will ascend there in the same way that John himself will. But Lucia illustrates Dante's need for light and arouses him. Now, she comes to the gate of Purgatory, and he has to climb 3 steps here. And we find these 7 P's. So let me hear. I'm Lucia, right? So there was the eagle. The lady came, I'm Lucia, so he speaks to her. He makes out a gate, and there below it there were 3 steps, their colors different, leading to it. And a custodian who had not yet spoken, as I looked more and more directly at him, I saw him seated on the upper step, his face so radiant I could not bear it, and in his hand he held a naked sword, which so reflected rays toward us that I, time and again, tried to sustain that sight in vain. Speak out from there, what are you seeking? So he began to speak, where is your escort? Take care lest you be harmed by climbing here. My master, Virgil, answered him, but just before a lady from heaven and familiar with these things told us, that's the gate, go there. And may she speed you on your path of goodness, the gracious guardian of the gate began again. Come forward, therefore, to your stairs. And he does come forward. And he sees the 3 steps. Now, what are the 3 steps? These, so first of all, he carves 7 P's on Dante's forehead. And then he takes him to the 3 steps. The 3 steps are 3 different colors. The first one, the 3 steps corresponds to the sacrament of confession in the church, confessing of your sin. This is not Protestant. It's Catholic, right? In terms of the first step is white. It reflects, it is meant to represent reflection. The light on your own sinfulness. Think about your sins. Contemplate. The second step of penance, now you go up, having reflected upon your sin, confessed your sin, you now are remorseful for the sin. So first you see it, you cognitively observe it. The second, the purple step, you express your remorse, your contrition at the guilt that you have. The third step is blood red, because the sin that you just confessed has been cleansed by the blood of the Lamb. The blood red step. You finally, only after you have acknowledged your sin, felt the remorse that comes with sin, then is it purged from you. But these are 3 different steps, 3 different stages. Having gone that, and it's made of porphyry, flaming red as blood that spurts from the veins, and the upper step has a key, the 7 P's. Trace the 7 P's. When you have entered within, take care to wash away these wounds. and then has a key. He's got two keys. One's made of gold, the other's made of silver. First with the white, then with the golden key, then with the yellow key, he plied the gate so as to satisfy me. Undoes the gate. The silver key undoes the knot of sin, opens the gate to purgatory, and now you can go upward to it. So everything up to this point is leading up to Mount Purgatory. From this point, he will then ascend upward to it. But first, you have to get to the point. Confessing your sin is before you can ascend in virtue. That's the entry point to it. So note, there are no pagans on Mount Purgatory because they have to confess their sins. They have to know that they are sins. They have to experience the grace of God. They don't know those things if they are just virtuous pagans like Virgil. There's a notion of, so in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, there is a notion of virtue, of course, but also the way in which virtue can go wrong. So a courageous man, courage is a virtue, but you can betray virtue in two ways. One of them is you can be a coward, but it's not called sin because it's not against God. It's against your human nature. Don't be a coward. Men are meant to be courageous. Don't be a wimp. The other way you can betray courage is by being foolhardy, throwing yourself crazily and throwing your life away, like trying to stop a car coming at 60 miles an hour, or doing something insane, right? So yeah, I'm going to stop it, and maybe in my case, I'll be able to stop the car somehow, and it'll be like, a comic book superhero, and just sort of catch it at the right time and lift it and flip it over, whatever. It's a sort of courage, but it's courage gone to the excess. The other is a deficiency of courage. It understands that, but it doesn't understand sin because sin is a contradiction of God's character. Well, the character of the gods in the pagan world is not good. So there's no violation there, per se. Okay, so it's just a different thing. They understand what virtue is. They understand the way that virtue can be violated, but it's not the same thing. You don't confess to that. You measure up to the virtues, and you can fall short of the virtues, but you don't have the sin of not measuring up to the virtues. That's a Christian concept. This is why Christians need to talk about sin, because there is no natural knowledge of sin. It's God's righteousness that reveals that sin is sin. Pagans don't know about that. They know about virtue. That's not the same thing. So, as I say, the categorization of these things is, I think, helpfully portrayed here. Oh, no, it wasn't there. It was... No, it wasn't here. Okay, I've lost it altogether. Never mind. Oh, no, it is here. The first three, pride, envy, and wrath, or anger, are the result of misdirected love. Sort of like incontinence. The second, or the fourth terrace there, is a deficient love. The first three are misdirected. The second is deficient, second type. And the third is, the terrace 5, 6, and 7 are excessive love of things. Avarice, gluttony, and lust. All based on material goods. So pride, envy, and wrath are misdirected love. You wished your neighbor ill. Sloth or sloth is deficient love, not enough love. Just couldn't get off. You couldn't be bothered. And the third three types are based on a love of material goods. The material goods are good, but they're not as good as the one who gave the goods. He distinguishes all different types of loves here, and I'm not going to go into much greater detail here. I want to come to the end of this, more or less. Canto, I think I'm going to have to go there. To Canto 30. In Canto 30, we've reached this point in Purgatory, the top, up here. If you want to see it in a different way, we've reached it here. Right, the green bit, right at the top of Mount Purgatory. And we are at the realm of pure light. It's the light of the intellect. It's where we can observe the true good, undimmed by our own sin. Once we've been purged of sin, we can not only see material things of this world, but we can see them in accordance with true virtue, which we've lost because of the fall. Now we can see that. We see things the way God sees them. So the intellectual state of mind is where our God-given powers are fully operational the way they were in the garden when Adam and Eve were without sin. And his language can't describe the experience at this point. But the pure light that he sees is transformed into a river. And he now, still operating within the constraints of time, starts looking upwards and sees that the handover takes place here. This is why I'm looking at Canto 30, I think. Yes. Isn't that right? Or have I got this wrong? I thought it was right here. Oops, I don't have it on the right page. Well, that's fine. Oh, there it is. I have at times seen all the eastern sky becoming rose as began day, and seen adorned in lovely blue the rest of heaven, and seen the sun's face rise so veiled that it was tempered by the mist and could permit the eye to look at length upon it. So within a cloud of flowers there were cast by the angelic hands, and then rose up and then fell back outside and in the chariot. A woman showed herself to me above a white veil. She was crowned with olive boughs. Her cape was green, her dress beneath flame red. Within her presence I had once been used to feeling trembling, wonder, dissolution, but that was long ago. He'd been used to that. Who is this? This is Beatrice. He used to feel trembling and wonder and dissolution. He'd lost control of himself in her presence. It's Beatrice. But now, that was long ago, still through my soul. Now she was veiled, could not see her directly by way of hidden force that she could move. I felt the mighty power of old love. As soon as that deep force had struck my vision, the power that, when I had not yet left my boyhood had already transfixed me, I turned around and to my left, just as a little child. So he sees this woman, he knows who it is, and knows that it's Beatrice, but not as she was, as she is now, and as he is now, not because he's been transformed by ascending Mount Purgatory, and he doesn't know what to do, and he looks to his left for who? Virgil. Where's Virgil? I am left, and to say to Virgil, I am left with less than one drop of blood, that my blood that does not tremble. I recognize the signs of the old flame. He's afraid of falling back into sin, but Virgil had deprived us of himself. Virgil, the gentlest father, he to whom I gave myself for my salvation, and even all our ancient mother lost, was not enough to keep my cheeks, though washed with dew, from darkening again with tears. And then Beatrice speaks to him. Dante, though Virgil is leaving you, do not yet weep. Do not weep yet. You'll need your tears for what another sword must yet inflict. Just like an admiral who goes to stern and proud to see the officers who guide the other ships encouraging their tasks, so on the left side of the chariot I turned around when I heard my name, which of necessity I transcribe here. I saw the lady who had first appeared to me beneath the veils of the angelic flowers look at me across the stream, though the veil she wore down from her head, which was encircled by Minerva's leaves. Minerva is Athena. She has the wisdom, the leaves of wisdom around her head, but now it's divine wisdom. Did not allow her to be seen distinctly. Her stance still regal and disdainful, she continued just as one who speaks, but keeps until the end the fiercest part of her speech. Look here. Stop looking backwards. Stop looking at that earthly wisdom. Now you need to fix your eyes ahead. You're going to look onward and upward. Look here, for I am Beatrice. I am. How were you able to ascend the mountain? Did you not know that man is happy here? My lowered eyes caught sight of the clear stream, but when I saw myself reflected there, such shame weighed on my brow, my eyes drew back. And toward the grass, just as a mother seems harsh to her child, so did she seem to me. How bitter is the savor of stern pity. Her words were done. The angels suddenly sang, In te, Domine, speravi. In you, Lord, we hope. Hope. In you, Lord, hope. But their singing did not go past Peres Mias, my feet. Even as snow among the sap-filled trees along the spine of Italy will freeze when gripped by gusts of the Slavonian winds, then as it melts will trickle through itself, that is, if winds breathe north from shade-less lands, just as beneath the flame the candle melts, so I, before I'd heard the song of those whose notes always accompany the notes of the eternal spheres, was without tears and sighs, but when I heard the sympathy for me within their gentle harmonies, as if they'd said, Lady, why shame him so? Then did the ice that had restrained my heart become water and breath. Remember in hell, it was the other way around? Breath, water, ice. Now the ice becomes water and then breath. It's a reversal. And through my lips and eyes they issued anguish. Still standing motionless upon the left side of the chariot, she then addressed the angels who had been compassionate. You are awake in never-ending day, and neither night nor sleep can steal from you one step the world would take along its way. Therefore, I'm more concerned that my reply be understood by him who weeps beyond, so that his sorrows match his sin. Not only through the work of the great spheres, which guide each seed to a determined end, depending on what stars are its companions, but through the bounty of the godly graces, etc. And so he crosses then into the next realm in penitence where tears are shed. And we come to the end of the canto of Purgatorio. Oops. The end. Oh, that's Paradiso. Back. Purgatorio, and then I'll come to Paradiso. Right at the end, I just wanted to draw your attention to how each of the canticles ends. Since all the pages predisposed for this, the second canticles are full. The curb of art will not let me continue. From that most holy wave I now return to Beatrice, remade as new trees are renewed when they bring forth new boughs. I was pure and prepared to climb unto the stars. So now he's ready to climb up into the stars. And he needed to first ascend Mount Purgatory and be ready for that. Now he's ready to go further up and further in, just like Aslan and the Lion, the Witch, and like at the last battle. He's prepared to go up. And in, because the inn is, there's an imperial city, or the celestial city, and he's outside the city gates. He's not in the city yet. He's outside of it. He's left the city of this world. He's going to the city of God. He's outside the city. He needs to go inside the city. And it's a realm of pure light. But he is prepared to climb unto the stars. Last word is stars. Stellae. Plural with an E in. Let's go to Paradiso. Briefly. Oh dear, briefly. Begins as such: the glory of the one who moves all things permeates the universe and glows in one part more and in another less. I was within heaven, the heaven that receives more of his light, and I saw things that he who from that height descends forgets or cannot speak. For nearing its desired end, our intellect sinks into an abyss so deep that memory fails to follow it. Nevertheless, as much as I, within my mind, could treasure of the holy kingdom, shall now become the matter of my song. Third incantation, O good Apollo. What? Why is he calling upon Apollo? Apollo is the god of what? The sun, the light. O good Apollo, for this final task make me the vessel of your excellence. What you to merit our loved laurel ask. He's also the poet. He inspires the poets, this Apollo. Until this point, one of Parnassus's peaks sufficed for me. But now I face the test. Now, Mount Parnassus is where the poets reside and the gods reside. It's the laurel leaf of the glory of the great poets. I was satisfied before with that, being accounted like, remember the pagan poets that were in limbo? I was satisfied with that before. But now I face the test, the agon, the battle that is left. I need both crests. Only a Christian can describe what goes on here. Virgil knew nothing about it. He can't help me. So he needs the greatest of all inspiration to write the third and final canticle. And so he does. But he needs prayer. Enter into my breast, within me breathe the very power you made manifest when you drew Marsyas out from his limbs' sheath. O godly force, if you so lend yourself to me, that I might show the shadow of the blessed realm inscribed within my mind, then you would see me underneath the tree you love. There I shall take as crown the leaves of which my theme, and you shall make me worthy. So seldom, Father, are those garlands gathered for triumph of a ruler or a poet, a sign of fault or shame in human wills, etc. So he begins with, again, another invocation of the muse, but this time it's Apollo who he names, because it's the light, it's the true light. And again, he's not invoking a pagan deity here. It's the name of the pagan deity that has associations with poetry and with the light of the sun, because he's now in the realms of pure light as he goes onward and upward. We find in the third canto that Beatrice is no longer with him. She gets him there and she's gone. Where did she go back? Well, she went back to her eternal place in the celestial rose. I'll get to that later in a second. She's now a vast distance from him, but because the light of the celestial realm is different than ours, he can still see her with great clarity as if she were right beside him. So his physical sight has almost been purified. He's got like elven eyes in Tolkien. He can see a great distance. He can see with great clarity. He can see her long off. So there's no time or space in the eternal. And so this is the problem here. When Dante is describing things for us, he is getting rid of the conditions of space and time. Well, how can we see things without those conditions? Because we always see in visual terms. So this is one of the challenges here. Let me come to Canto 33 because I've got 15 minutes left, and if I'm going to waste or spend 15 minutes on Paradiso, I may as well come to the end. Paradiso. Well, no, you do not have to go to hell, through hell to get to paradise. And Dante himself did not have to go through hell to get to paradise. He did so for the purpose of describing for people, this is the Commedia, right? The Divine Comedy. I didn't mention, it occurred to me afterwards. I mentioned it in a different class because it didn't occur to me at the time. A comedy is a type of poetry or drama that is for the common people. It describes the lower classes. Tragedies talk about the aristocrats. These are people that are better than us. They fall from a great height. We sense their fall because they are superior to us. They act worse than us. They're treated, even though they are in this exalted place, they come to a great fall. A comedy deals with people who are worse than us or our equals, and we laugh at them. We don't laugh at aristocrats. We sense the fall of the aristocrat or the king. Right? There's something, whoa, if somebody so important can be brought low, how much more is the threat to me, who doesn't have their privilege and power and distinction? The comedy tends to be people who we think are ridiculous, or more like us at any rate, Dumb and Dumber, right? So that's the comedy. Dante writes this in Italian. It's the common tongue. He's not writing it in Latin anymore. It's not the church language. He's writing it to his fellow Italian people. He's wanting them to understand the world in all of its fullness. It's not a poem for the aristocrats. It's not, at the end of ancient epics, particularly in Virgil's case, Augustus Caesar becomes a star. He goes up to the heavens, becomes one of the constellations, because he claims to be a god, right? So he becomes divinized. But that's the aristocrat. That's not what happens here. Here, a common man goes up to the stars. And not only him, he says, nel mezzo del giorno de nostra vita, of our life's journey, in the middle of all our lives' journey. So everyone will go up into the stars in the heaven of heavens. Not just Augustus the Great. He goes up to, and everyone else is in the underworld, but Augustus will go up into the heavens. No, everyone is going here who has faith, including starting with this little pilgrim whose name is Dante. He represents each and every one of us in that sense. So he is going there, and he is going to a place where in the end of the Paradiso, he sees a beatific vision, a blessed vision, where he will contemplate God directly. Now, no man can describe what God is like, even visually. We're told again, 1 Corinthians 13, now we see as in a glass darkly, but then face to face. So we see God like in a mirror, and an ancient mirror is not like our modern mirrors. It's sort of dark and cloudy, and we don't see clearly in that mirror, but then we will see very clearly. But how can you describe that? Faces have visual descriptions. This will not. Space and time does not apply here. There's no way for him to describe what he's about to see, but he's going to describe it anyway. So there's an element of mystery about this. Remember the Beatitudes that Jesus gives in the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are those. This will be a part of this as well, but this is probably more influenced by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, famous mystic. He prays to the Virgin Mary here to allow Dante his final vision, and the final vision that he will see is of God, the triune God. He will see the Trinity. Let me give a final illustration here. This is called a rose window. In the ancient, or in the cathedrals of the Middle Ages, it took them hundreds of years to build these cathedrals. Cruciform in shape. At the end of the cathedral end, you would look, and there would be something called a rose window. The rose window would be a look at not just a colored piece of glass. There's obviously a colored piece of glass. What it's portraying is what you are going to see in eternity. You're already looking at it within the church because the cross is pointing you towards this vision. And it's called a rose window because it looks like a rose. It's in that shape. But at the center of that, here we have, well, this is in Notre Dame, so it's not the Trinity, but here we have, it looks to me like the Virgin Mary with the Christ child on her lap. because this is the dedicated Notre Dame is to Our Lady, as you would expect from the French, Notre Dame. So the Virgin Mary is there. She has a crown on, and Lord Jesus is at her feet. But around her are various other things, and these will be described in the book of Revelation. But this is something that Dante has in his mind's eye. Not Notre Dame, but a rose window in cathedrals. And this is what heaven is like. And again, this is why it's placed there in a cathedral. It symbolizes something that will be seen in the future. This is why you're looking at it when you're in church. You're facing not the priest, although the priest stands with the altar, at the altar, and that's where communion takes place, right? And so there's a sacrifice and you go up 3 steps, like here in Tyndale, there's 3 steps up, right? And then at the end of it would be a rose window. Well, we don't have a rose window. But that's the idea behind it. So this life is preparing you for eternal life. And the ritual that is undertaken here is as a trial run, but it's getting you where you're eventually going to go. So he sees here a rose window. And Bernard prays to the Virgin Mary that he be granted a vision, the final vision, which is that of God, the Trinity. And so there's a final mystery that Dante has to penetrate, and he gets it through the Virgin Mary. Remember, the Virgin Mary is the source of the Incarnation. And thereby, she is man's link to God in that sense. So the Creator becomes a child of man. He's the Son of God, Son of man. At this point, God, the Son, becomes the Son of man, right? There's the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. God the Son now becomes also the Son of man. He's both God and man. He has 2 natures. And so there's a mystery there, even in God's dual nature of being both God and man. And the creeds present that in a way that holds on to these things without contradiction. But as he comes to the paradox and the mystery of the Incarnation, he sees and understands how this works. He doesn't present it in theological terms, but he does present it in poetic terms. And the prayer, this man from the deepest hollow in the universe up to its height has seen the lives of spirits one by one, now pleads with you through grace to grant him so much virtue that he may lift his vision higher still and may lift it towards the ultimate salvation. And I, who never burned for my own vision more than I burned for his, do offer you all of my prayers and pray that they may not fall short. That with your prayers you may disperse all of the clouds of his mortality, so that the highest joy be his to see. This too, O Queen, who can do what you would, I ask of you, that after such a vision, his sentiments preserve their perseverance. May your protection curb his mortal passions. See Beatrice, how many saints with her? They join my prayers. Everyone's praying for Dante that he be allowed to see this, and when he sees it, that he will then write it down and preserve it to inspire and encourage the people of God. The eyes that are revered and loved by God, now fixed upon the supplicant, showed us how welcome such devotions are to her, that is Mary. Then her eyes turn to the eternal light. There, do not think that any creature's eye can find its way as clearly as her sight. And I, who now was nearing him who is the end of all desires, God, as I ought, lifted my longing to its ardent limit. Bernard was signaling, he smiled, to me to turn my eyes on high. But I already was doing what he wanted me to do. Because of my sight, becoming pure, was able to penetrate the ray of light more deeply. That light sublime, which in itself is true, light of light. From that point on, what I could see was greater than speech can show. So now he's going to describe in words what speech fails to show. He can see, but he can't fully describe it for us. He will endeavor to attempt, nonetheless. At such a sight it fails, and memory fails when faced with such excess. As one, now epic simile, as one who sees within a dream. And later, the passion that had been imprinted stays, but nothing of the rest returns to mind. Such am I. For my vision almost fades completely, yet it still dwells within my heart, the sweetness that was born of it. So is the snow beneath the sun unsealed. And so, on the light leaves beneath the wind, the oracles the Sibyl wrote were lost. O highest light. So he goes from light to light to light to now, O highest light. You, raised so far above the minds of mortals to my memory, give back something of your epiphany and make my tongue so powerful. This is the final invocation of the muse. Comes right at the end. Not usually recognized, but I think this is, again, a final appeal to a muse. Make my tongue so powerful that I may leave to people of the future one gleam of the glory that is yours, for by returning somewhat to my memory and echoing a while within these lines, your victory will be more understood. The living ray that I endured, and here's the answer to the prayer. The living ray that I endured was so acute that I believe I should have gone astray had my eyes turned away from it. I can recall that because of this, was bolder in sustaining it until my vision reached the infinite goodness. O grace abounding, through which I presumed to set my eyes on the eternal light, so long that I spent all my sight on it. Until he reaches an image that he simply can't describe. A universal shape which that not takes. For speaking this, I feel a joy that is more ample. That one moment brings more forgetfulness to me than 25 centuries have brought to the endeavor that startled Neptune with the Argo's shadow. So was my mind, completely wrapped, intent, steadfast, and motionless, gazing. And it grew even more enkindled as it watched. And what does he see? So he is standing still, but it's moving. He sees a sort of a cosmic dance, a perichoresis. There's a dance going on in the triune Godhead. One circle seemed reflected by the second, as rainbow is by rainbow, and the third seemed fire breathed equally by these two circles. So he sees circles moving. Remember, describing the Trinity, how do you describe this? How do you define the Trinity? How do you even describe it? He sees three circles moving. How incomplete is speech, how weak when set against my thought. And this, to what I saw, is such, to call it little is too much. Eternal light, you only dwell within yourself, and only you know you. Self-knowing, self-known. You love and smile upon yourself. Okay? That circle which begotten so appeared in you as light reflected, when my eyes had watched it with attention for some time, within itself and colored like itself, to me seemed painted with our effigy. So he looks at the light, he looks at these three circles, and then he looks and sees that one of them looks like us. It has the image of God, or the image of God as in a man. Remember, Jesus is the image of God, and we are made in the image of God. Now he sees somebody who looks like a man within the Godhead. So that my sight was set on it completely, the effigy. As the geometer intently seeks to square the circle, but he cannot reach through thought on thought the principle he needs. So I searched that strange sight. I wished to see the way in which our human effigy suited the circle and found place in it. How does Jesus fit with God's design? How does he fit within that? The one whose image we bear, how does that fit? And my own wings were far too weak for that. But then my mind was struck by light that flashed, and as with this light received what it had asked. Here force failed my high fantasy, but my desire and will were moved already like a wheel revolving uniformly by the love that moves the sun and the other stars. Stelle, at the end of it all. Stelle. Last word of the final canticle, just like Dici, come rota che gigalmente mossa è l'amor che muove il sole e le altre stelle. Stelle, stars. It moves the sun, il sole, and the other stars. Concludes each candle with it, but what moves it all? L'amor. It's the love that moves all things. It's the love that is the thing that guides everything here. Love divine, all loves excelling. Quote Wesley. Right? That's the principle that is moving the entire vision. And we are now, Easter Sunday, of course, resurrection. The light has conquered the darkness. At the end, he sees light, who is love, and with a blinding flash of light, wakes up as if from a dream, and then writes it down. Anyway.